Hey everyone, glad to have you watching here today. My name is Michael. I'm the developer advocate lead at Xano, and I'm joined by
Andreas. I am a co-founder of Toddle.
And today we have an exciting joint video for you today. We're going to be putting both Xano and Toddle together to bring you a memberships application. And before we do that, just want to talk a little more broadly about what Xano is, what Toddle is, and why you would want to use both Xano and Toddle together. All right, so I first want to talk a little bit more broadly for those who might not be familiar with what Xano is. So Xano is a no-code backend. And when we talk about software today, there's really two pieces to it. First being the front end. So this is basically what Toddle provides. And this is everything that the user sees and interacts with, right? Those are all the different buttons on the screen, the beautiful display, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's also the backend, and this is what Xano provides. And this is all the logic behind the scenes. So when a user actually clicks one of those buttons, what logic actually happens, right? And so the backend consists of the server, the database, and the API. So the server to power the application, the database that stores all that content, and the API, which is that business logic layer, and this messenger between your Xano backend and your Toddle front end. So speaking more specifically about Xano, so Xano is a scalable single source of truth. So once again, a powerful server. So we deploy a single tenant instance. So you are on your own server with your own server resources that you can scale to the moon, a flexible PostgreSQL database. So we consider that one of the most flexible databases in the world that can be scaled both horizontally and vertically, and a no-code API builder. So a way to create all of your business logic in a no-code framework and iterate very, very quickly. I also want to mention that we're no-code first, but developer-friendly at Xano. So of course you can create everything in that no-code framework. But as you do start to expand and scale, we have some more developer-rich features that might become more important as you reach that scale. Things like we're able to sidecar a Docker microservice to interact with your Xano backend. You can connect directly to that PostgreSQL database if you want to inject it into different tools like a business intelligence tool, or if you're comfortable, you can write direct SQL queries, do Lambda functions, things like Redis caching, and we even have cloud portability. So bring your own cloud on our enterprise offerings. Last but not least, Xano is built to scale, 100% backend focused with security and compliance best practices in mind. So in its DNA, Xano is built to scale. We use Docker to containerize everyone's single tenant instance to help us deploy that, Kubernetes to orchestrate scaling. Once again, that PostgreSQL flexible database, and all our self-serve plans are hosted on the Google Cloud platform. And it's okay if you're not super familiar with these tools and concepts, but we like to say if you can trust Google's ability to scale, you can trust Xano. And last but not least, you see these different compliance certifications at the bottom of my screen. We're constantly going through penetration tests and audits to be able to accomplish things like ISO 27001, SOC 2 Type 2, HIPAA compliance, GDPR, and we're continuing to evolve and expand that to serve all your security and compliance needs here at Xano. So without further ado, let's jump back to Andreas and hear more about Toddle.
Hi. So yeah, we heard a little bit about how Xano handles the back end of that pyramid, and Toddle is a tool that handles the front end. So generally, when you have a front end for a service like Xano, you generally go one or two ways. You're either building a web application front end or you're building a native mobile app. And there are a lot of great services for building native mobile apps. Toddle here is specifically for building web applications. And Toddle is focused on kind of the same user group here as Xano are, in the sense that it's really with the emphasis on power and flexibility. You want to be able to take your product wherever that needs to go. You want your users to decide what are the features, what are the direction your product should go, not the limitations of your platform, right? So Toddle kind of lets you build whatever you want, like anything you can build in a web browser, anything you build as a web app, you can build in Toddle. And combining it with something like Xano means you have a really powerful and robust backend. And those two tools work really well together, as we'll show here today. Yeah. So should we start by taking a look at how our Xano backend is set up for this project?
Yeah, I want to maybe just discuss one other, advantage of using something like Xano, which is 100% backend focus, and Toddle, which is 100% front-end focus. Is I think this idea of co-development makes it very much easy and streamlined, where it's very clear where your backend workflows begin and end, and your front-end workflows begin and end as well. And I will add to, like, one of the things that we do at Xano is we auto document all those API endpoints, which we're about to see as well. So when it does come time to plug into your front end like Toddle, everything is there documented and ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the point that these are two separate services is something that maybe sometimes is a little bit undervalued. But the reality is that every project is a little bit different. So you might be building a mobile app and you need a powerful backend for that. And rather than go and try to figure out what kind of platform offer you mobile capabilities plus a server, and can that actually handle everything that Xano can? Actually having different services focus on each part generally means that you just get the best software for each part of the system, right? And it may be that now you need a web front end for your application, but you might want to add mobile on later, or vice versa. So being able to put together a stack of tools that work really efficiently together means that you can put together the stack that works for exactly your project.
Exactly. Cool. Well, let's jump over to Xano now and talk about our memberships app that we'll be building. Now, before we jump into building the backend in Xano for our memberships app, let's talk about a few of the key features that we want to build into the backend. So with any memberships application, we want users to actually be able to sign up for a membership or cancel a membership if they no longer want to be a member of your application. So adding and canceling memberships. We want to be able to gate specific content for members only, right? Give people a reason to actually want to become a member. And maybe we even have some non-member content that if someone wants to sign up, and you might want to tease them with some content to kind of hook them in and sign them as a member. So we'll talk about both of those. Now, with member-specific or exclusive content, we want to think about protecting that content for your app, right? So we're going to leverage Xano's private file storage for that member-only content. And why are we going to do that? So, it's one thing to, let's say, gate a piece of content or video within your application, but let's say a user is able to get that file URL. Theoretically, they could share that out to anyone who's not a member of your application. But with private file storage, we can actually create a signed URL that expires after a certain amount of time that we specify, so that you can actually protect that content and give people a reason to keep becoming members of your application. Last but not least, auto renewals. So we'll have two different types of memberships, either monthly or annual. So when that next cycle comes up, if it's either the next month or the next year, we want to be able to renew people for that next cycle of their membership. So we'll talk about all of that in the next part, which will be in Xano. So I'll see you over there. Okay, so over to Xano now. You can see I've started with a relatively blank workspace. I do have the generated user table from Xano, but let's jump to the database. I want to start to set up the database. So I'll add a couple more tables, edit some schema. We will edit this user table a little bit, but first, let's add a couple tables. First will be membership. And this will be pretty simple. And I'm going to do type here. And remember, we'll have monthly and annual. I'm also going to go ahead here and do integer. We'll call this price. And even though we're not building payments into this part here, I just want to sort of show you the foundation that you might start to at least think about if you do decide to kind of extend it and go down that payments route. But for the sake of this exercise, we'll go ahead and do monthly here. We'll say price is 10, and then maybe also annual, and we'll say 99 here. Great. And then we also want our content table. So here, I'm going to go ahead and do a title for my content. I'm going to have a Boolean field. And I'm going to call this premium. And this is just going to indicate whether or not a video requires membership. So this will sort of enforce that here. Whether that's true, that will mean it's premium content. False, sort of non-premium content. And let's go ahead to storage here. And I'm going to do a video here. And we'll start with public files. So this would be non-premium content, right? Non-members, anyone can view this, right? So I'll go ahead and say public video here. And then I'll go down and do another video, but this time I'm going to make it a private file. And so this will be specific only for our members. And I'll call this private file. Only our members will be able to see this, and we'll generate those signed URLs for this so that people can't share this out to people who aren't members of your application. Great. So that will be the setup for content. And let's go over to our user table now. And I do want to go ahead and make some changes here. So I'm going to add on to our schema. And I'm going to go ahead and do an object here. And we'll call this our membership object. And let's go ahead and click into here and add to it. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to add an enum, and this will be status. And the values here will be active, inactive, and canceling. And so let's talk about these three values. So active would be someone who signs up for a membership. They have an active membership. Inactive will be someone who signs up, but isn't ready to become a member yet, or maybe they were a member, canceled, their entire cycle had already passed. And then that last one, canceling, is when they're a member, but they cancel in the middle of their cycle. So let's say someone signs up for monthly, 15 days in, they decide to cancel. Theoretically, they should still be able to access your app as a member for those last 15 days of the month. So we'll talk about just how do we, detect that and still allow them to access that application. So we'll have status. I'm going to do a table reference to the type of membership. And then I'm also going to do some timestamps here. So first timestamp will be the start. So start of a membership. We'll do another timestamp. And this will be the renew date. And we'll talk about how to calculate all these for sure. And then we'll do one more, and this will be our cancel, or we'll just call this actually our end date here. Great. So that's what the schema is going to look like in here. And I'll go ahead and actually populate this with some content so you can, or some data, some records so you can actually see what this looks like. Okay, so I went ahead and added just a few simple records here. So you can see we have 3 different users here. I want to show you an example of what the membership might look like for someone who's active. Here's the monthly start and renew. There's no end timestamp. And then someone who's inactive, like Andreas here. So no data for the membership ID because they don't have a membership yet. No data for start, renew, and end yet. And we can go back. You've seen what membership sort of looks like. And here's what content might look like. And I mean to check this for premium, but here's what our gated content would sort of look like. They'd be the private videos here and the Boolean true for premium. And then maybe our non-member content or content anyone can see would be a public video, and we don't have that checked. But now that you know what that might sort of look like, let's jump over to the API now and start to set things up. Now, the first thing I want to do is actually make a change to my signup API endpoint here. And why I want to do that is because now our user record is going to have this membership object. So we want to be able to actually create that properly. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a variable here. And I'm going to call this membership. And let's go ahead and just make this an object here. And I'll go ahead and set this status. And we'll just go ahead and call this inactive. And since when a user signs up, they're not a member just yet. We'll have a different API endpoint where they can actually add a membership. This is really all we need to do for this membership object here. Just making sure we're setting that status to an active. And let's go ahead and actually populate that down here. So let's save this. And now, for example, if I sign someone new up, and we'll call this new person here, and we'll say new at person.com, and just give them a password here, 123, for example, and run this. Let's jump over and look at what new person looks like here in our database table. And you can see here, they are marked as inactive. So what do we do next when, let's say someone wants to actually add themselves as a member? Let's go ahead and build that API endpoint. So I'm going to jump back over to the API, and we'll go into this API group, and I'm going to create a brand new API endpoint from scratch here. And let's call this post, and maybe this will be part of the user, and I'll call this membership. And so in here, let's go ahead and do a few things. So first and foremost, we actually want to make sure that this endpoint requires user authentication, right? So they first sign up to our application, they get that auth token, and now they can actually hit this API endpoint to create a membership. So let's first and foremost here, I want to start in the inputs. We'll do a table reference to the membership that they want to actually add. So let's go ahead here, and I'm going to do a database request, get record from our membership table, and we'll map that up to that ID, right? So they can either get a monthly or an annual membership. And why that is important is because we want to be able to detect when they're starting this membership and when their renew date is. So depending on if it's monthly or annual, that might change things up. Right after this, I'm actually going to have a precondition here and make sure that the membership that's put in actually exists. So we'll just set this not equal to null here so that we're actually hitting a membership here. Great. And next, let's go ahead, and I'm going to create a variable here. And this will be a membership object that's going to go on the user, just similar to what we did in that sign up endpoint. So here, let's go ahead and actually create this. So we're going to start with status again. And this time, it's going to be active. Okay. We'll go ahead and do another set filter. And this is going to be membership ID as text. Let's not make it that input because this is the actual field name, but the value here will be that input. Or we could also do membership _1.id. Two different flavors of doing it, but this will suffice. And let's continue to build this object, right? What else was in there? So we also had a start timestamp, right? And so we can just make that the timestamp of now. Okay, so this membership is starting now. Let's go ahead and do our renew. In renew, what I'm going to go ahead and do, I'm going to take now. I'm going to add a filter here. I'm going to do transform timestamp. And I'm just going to go ahead and say, I'm going to say plus 1 month here. So what that will do is this will take now and add 1 month to it. And I'm doing 1 month instead of 30 days. You could do either or, but 1 month will automatically detect how months have different days in each month. Some are 31, some are 30, one's even 28, right? So that'll take all that into account. Unless you want to do 30 days, you can do plus 30 days there, right? So let's go ahead and save that. So that's great, but what if someone signs up and has an annual membership, right? So let's go ahead and actually, I'm going to copy this here. And instead of plus 1 month here, let's go ahead and say plus 1 year. Okay, update and save. But now we have these two membership objects. So what do we need to do? We need to be able to fork these with a conditional depending on what membership our user wants to sign up for. So I'm just going to come in here and say conditional. And I'll just say if our variable membership1 dot type equals annual. And we could say this either way, but just make sure to put the right one where But if it's annual, we'll make sure to, and we'll double check here, do that annual renewal date. Else, we'll just go ahead and do that monthly renewal date. And now here, just at the bottom, we can go ahead and edit our user record. And this is also why it's important to have authentication on, because what user are we editing? We're going to get that from our auth token with auth ID. And our membership object is going to get updated with our membership variable. That's also why it's nice to have this conditional that creates this variable only one time, so we know exactly which membership variable to insert there into that membership object. And we can go ahead, we can return our user here if we so choose. You probably won't really have a return for this API endpoint though. You might just have a message like success membership added, but that's all we need. I'm just going to publish this for now. And let's go back now. And next I'm going to go ahead and create that cancel flow, right? So this is going to be another post here, and I'm just going to call this user/cancel and hit save and create this. Okay, so with our cancellation endpoint, let's also make sure we have our user authentication on. We're going to go ahead and start with a get record from our user, because we just want to be able to get that membership object that's attached to our user. So we can look up the user by the auth ID, which is going to be just detected within our auth token. We'll go ahead here. I'm going to create a variable, and this is going to be our membership object once again that we're going to go ahead and update. So this is the object here, and let's go ahead and start to build this. So status now, we're going to change that to canceling. And let's go ahead and do membership ID here. In the value here, we're going to get this from user dot our membership object dot membership ID. So we're just using dot notation there to drill into our user variable and grab the existing membership ID there. And so our start date, we're not going to make any changes to that. So we can just use dot notation here to have start remain the same. And then our renew, we're actually going to just go ahead and call that null here. So they're no longer renewing. I'm going to copy from the start for our end here. And I'm going to call our end. I'm going to replace that with the renew date. Okay, so our end timestamp ends up becoming the renew. Okay, great. So last but not least, we just want to go ahead and edit our user record. So let's get edit record here. We'll go user. We'll make sure we're editing the same user here. We could use auth ID or user.id. It will all be the same. And we're just simply going to update our membership object with the variable we just created. We'll return membership 2 here and publish this. But so let's jump over to our user table here and let's look at an example here. So let's say that Michael here is going to actually cancel his membership, right? So that would be myself here. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to run this. And you notice we don't have any inputs. This would just be like a button like cancel my membership. You might want to have on the front end some kind of speed bump to say like, are you sure? They could click yes, and then that could actually trigger this API endpoint and we'll detect who's canceling based on that auth token. So if I run this now, well, you can see how this user object's going to go ahead and look different now. We see this as canceling, but our end date here now is replaced by that renew, and our renew is now null. Okay, so let's go back, and I'm going to jump back to the API now. So we've created this sign up endpoint where we create that membership object. We've created 2 new endpoints, both creating a membership, right? And also canceling a membership. Now, if someone has a member, or someone is a member, they want to be able to see gated content, and we also want inactive members to be able to maybe see some teaser content. So let's go about creating that. I'm going to steal this CRUD query all content here and jump into my query all record. So this endpoint will be for non-premium content only. So let's just change this query here. And I'm just going to filter my content to make sure premium equals false here. Okay, we're going to save that. We're going to also turn on authentication here, right? So even though this is public content, we still want to make sure that a user signed up to your application to hit this API endpoint, right? So that's just best practices as well to require authentication. Now, of course, someone doesn't necessarily have to be a member, right? So I might also just edit this, maybe call this content inactive. You can call it content public, whatever you might want to. But let's go ahead and publish this. Now, we also want to create content for our active users. So I'm going to just go ahead and clone this for now. We'll definitely make some changes here. I'm going to call this content premium. And let's jump in here. And first thing I'm going to do is just change this from false to true. Let's go ahead and hit save that. But we still want to make sure that the person hitting this API endpoint, even though they're authenticated, is a member. So we need to enforce that that role is true before they're able to view any content. So we can go ahead and do that by first doing a get record to the user, and we'll map this up to the auth ID, right? Because in the output there, that will give us their membership status here. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, and let's go ahead and drag this up. And now we can go ahead and do a precondition. And our precondition enforces that something must be true. So here we just want to go ahead and say user1.membership.status. And here I'm going to say does not equal inactive. And why I'm doing that is so this is inclusive of both our active memberships and canceling. So we're taking into account, right? Remember, once again, if someone cancels in the middle of their cycle, they still have X amount of days or months or weeks to access your content as a member. So let's go ahead and save that. You can have a custom error message here if you do not have access, just in case. We'll go ahead and type that in there and hit save. And now you'll notice though, if I go ahead and run this, and we'll make sure to grab the right person here with actual access, so someone who's a member, we don't actually get the video URL automatically for our private files. We need to create that that signed URL. So I can actually do that by getting the paths of these. And because this is a list, I'm going to go ahead and do a for each loop through all of my content here. We'll call that item. And if we go to storage, you can see we have this private file signed URL option, and it asks for that path name. So here we're going to use the variable item because it's going to represent each iteration of content. We'll make sure to use dot notation here. We'll say private video dot path. And our time to live, this is in seconds. So this is how many seconds you want that file or that URL to actually live for. So default's 30 seconds. So that means if someone got a hand on this URL within the 30 seconds, they'd be able to share it and someone would be able to open it in those 30 seconds. So I like to keep it nice and low for that. If they're already viewing this piece of content, right, after those 30 seconds, it's not like the video will stop playing or anything like that. So we'll go ahead and return this as URL. And because I want to actually go ahead and update each object in here, so we'll go ahead and say update item dot private file, or sorry, dot private video dot URL. And URL is not a path yet, but we're going to create that right here with this update variable. And we'll say update and save. And now you can see when I go ahead and run this, well, you will actually see we get the URL in here, that signed URL for each piece of content that we can use on the front end. And just to show you what would happen if, let's say, let's do new person here who's not a user. we would actually hit this precondition. So this content is actually going to be gated here. Great. So let's go ahead and publish that. And so we have our general setup here. So we modified our sign up endpoint, right? We created that membership object. We have ways to both create a membership, also cancel a membership. And then we have our not gated content and our gated content with that private storage. The last thing I want to talk about is auto detecting renewals and cancellations. So I'm actually going to jump over to functions, and I actually have these pre-built. So let's talk about renewal first. So the reason I have these in functions is because this is something we want to run automatically in a background task. So I first built them in functions, and I show you how to insert that very easily into a background task. So for renewals, we're going to query all records, and based on two conditions. First, if that status is equal to active, and then we're going to go ahead and see if that membership.renew, I'm using this between filter, and I'm just using text today and tomorrow because Xano is able to evaluate relative time formats. And that's all linked up in our date and time documentation, which is pretty cool and very powerful for things like this. So we set that equal to true there. So both active, and if that renew is between today and tomorrow. And today is basically midnight of today and tomorrow is midnight of tomorrow. So we'll get all those users that fit those parameters. And one other thing I forgot to mention, in my output here, I just have a simple add-on where I guess I forgot to do save, but just to my membership. And I'm just going to go ahead and actually extend that membership ID because I want to know the type of membership, right? Because we're going to have different logic based on if that's annual, we'll go ahead and renew that out a year, or monthly, we'll set that renew cycle for 1 year. So let me go ahead and save that. And so we'll loop through, we'll call each of those items. And in here, we'll just go ahead and drill down into each object. We'll say item.membership _ membership is that an add-on.type. If that's equal to annual, well, you can see in here, we're just going to create that membership object again. And I'm going to start with the value being item.membership because we want all those values in there to carry over. But I'm going to just update basically that renew field. So I'm going to use a set filter, call it renew, and I'm going to take that existing value and do a transform timestamp for +1 year. If it's monthly, I'm going to do +1 month. And then we just simply go ahead and update that membership object with that variable. So that's renew, pretty easy. Wanted just to have that built out and talk through that because it does take a little bit. And then cancellation's pretty similar. You can see we'll actually go ahead and filter whatever members have their status as canceling. We'll use that same between filter for our cancel timestamp. And then we'll simply loop through that. And all we're doing here is moving the status to an active and then editing that record there. So, I would probably insert these into a background task. So for example, I'd call this renewals here. I would just drop in that function and we should be able to find that in custom functions or just search in here. I would just have that in there. Make sure to publish any drafts. I know I'm going through this quickly. The timing like this, I might just repeat this every day. And, I might do this at some time like, I don't know, 1 a.m. or, 12:01, whatever, maybe sometime kind of in the middle of the night there where that can sort of run. So someone still maybe gets their full last day if it's the cancellation one, or it just renews at that sort of time in the middle of the night. And that's sort of how I would just go about that. So now that we have our API endpoints, you did see some of these background tasks, which we won't use on the front end, but we do have those API endpoints. And we'll kind of show how with Toddle, we can actually connect those API endpoints to the front end to bring this whole application together. All right, so that wraps it up for the Xano setup for our memberships application between Xano and Toddle. Just a quick summary. Some of the high-level features we went through, adding and canceling memberships, so user can sign up and then they can sign up for a premium membership. Having that members-only content However, we have some public content that anyone who signs up for the app can see, but then they need actual membership to see this sort of gated content. We discussed how you can have the private storage for some of that gated content, so we can actually protect some of that IP and give people a reason to want to sign up so people aren't sharing out that gated content. And then also talked about doing stuff like auto renewals and canceling people when their subscription is up and it's no longer renewing, and that was in the background task. So next, go ahead and check out part 2 of Xano and Toddle. We'll be on with Andreas. We'll do a little review of some of this setup in Xano, but we'll mainly focus on the Toddle setup and how to actually connect our Xano API endpoints into our Toddle frontend to give us our complete application. So thanks for watching. Head over to check out the next part of our memberships application with Xano and Toddle.